Welcome everyone. Happy New Year. It's been so long since we've seen each other. I'm Michelle Stork. I'm the chair of the CSI committee. And this is our January 17th meeting, first one since before the hurricane. It's been a long time. Before I entertain a motion for approval of the agenda and the meeting minutes for our September 13th meeting, I was hoping we could just quickly go around the room and reintroduce ourselves, since it's been so long since we were in the same space, and the last time we were in the same space it was virtual. So if we could start in this corner of the room, that would be great.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Yolanda White, and I'd like to bring to someone's attention my first name is spelled on this, on the minutes for last month. Yeah, I only have one A in my name. It should be Yolonda. But I'm a reading teacher at Volcanic Middle School. I've worked in the school district in public schools for 20 years this year. It'll be 20 years.
Thank you, Yolanda.
You're welcome.
My name is Stan Metopoulos. I have two children that are in high school at Fort Myers High School, and I previously served on the finance committee. So.
Welcome. Thank you.
Hi, Christy Miller. I have two kids in the district, a elementary schooler and a middle schooler.
Thanks.
Hi, Bill Ribble. I'm a former UPS executive. Got into politics about 10 years ago here in Lee County, was the mayor of Estero.
Thanks, Bill. I'm Michelle Stork. I am an associate professor in the College of Education at FGCU. Many of my students work in this district. I have a daughter who teaches in this district and who graduated from Fort Myers High School. So I'm pretty invested in this school district.
My name's Lance Perez. I've got two kids in the district. One is in high school at North Fort Myers. The other is in Colusa Middle School. Happy to meet everybody face to face today.
Hello, everybody. I'm Dr. Brianne Romano. I am an assistant principal at Oasis Middle School. I served here in Lee County as a teacher and an assistant principal. My husband is a teacher at North Fort Myers High School. My son also attends North Fort Myers High School, and I'm glad to be here today.
Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Megan Clark. I work at Lee Health in the Strategy and Innovation Department. Have three stepkids who are in the district and wanted to give back to my community in this way.
Thank you.
And I'm Ken Savage. I've been in the district for a long time. I grew up here mostly, and my family also mostly all works in this district as well. My brothers, my wife, my brother's wives, we're very much invested, and our children all attend in the district as well. So it's also a role as a parent. And it's much probably more present-minded right now some days. But also, just as a point of clarity, I apologize in advance for my speech. I just had surgery on my to remove my wisdom teeth. They were impacted, so I'm still recovering. So if I'm having a difficult time, just understand it's due to that.
My name's Misty Lebo. I've been with the district for 25 years. I've got three kids that graduated from schools here in Lee County. The oldest being 36 now and the youngest being 28. And I've been following this gentleman around for a while, and he's one of my favorite bosses ever.
Thanks, Misty. Great. Well, now at least we all know who each other are, so that makes it easier. Can I get a motion to approve the January 17th agenda, tonight's
Bill
agenda?
Ribble, I'll make the motion.
Okay, one thing I did want to ask also, since Misty is new to our committee, is if you could do as Bill did and state your name before you make or second a motion, just so as she gets to know us, it'll be easier for her. Bill, does anybody have a second?
Mike, I'll second.
Thanks, Mike. All in favor of approving tonight's agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed or abstaining? Okay, so the next thing is to entertain a motion to accept the approval of the September 13th meeting minutes with the Yolanda's notation of the spelling of her name, so correction of that spelling. Do I have a motion for that?
I'll make the motion. Bill Ribble, I'll make the motion.
Thanks, Bill. Do I have a second?
Megan Clark, I second.
Thank you, Megan. All in favor of approving the minutes with that revision for the September 13th meeting? Say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Abstain? Great. So the next thing we have on our agenda is Dr. Savage giving us an update on the superintendent's anticipated strategic plan refresh.
Thank you, Dr. Stork, and thank you, committee. It's a pleasure to be here tonight. So with our new superintendent, Dr. Bernier, one of the benefits of having a person who comes in with a fresh set of eyes, coming from many different great experiences, not just in our state, but in other states as well, is that he really dove into our strategic plan. And one of the things he loved the most were our core values of our plan. But there were other aspects of the plan that he had a lot of questions about. And incidentally, we also have 3 new board members through this most recent election. So those board members were not part of our governance team at the development of the plan, the revisions of the plan, or anything along those lines. And so when you have that level of turnover at the governance team level, it only makes sense to take a nice look at it. Now, maybe they don't want to change anything. Maybe the plan is perfect as it's written in their eyes, but even just from an opportunity to delve into it and say, when we developed this most recently in 2019, does it still reflect where we're at now? I mean, we had a lot of changes since 2019. Most recently, the big hurricane that provided a significant detriment to our community, but also prior to that, the COVID and the impact of COVID. How's that impacted the loss of learning for our students and their academic outcomes, which many have suffered from that experience. But in some cases, it allowed us to accelerate, in utilizing technology in ways we had not. So there's just so much opportunity to do that. And so what Dr. Bernier is calling it is more of a strategic plan refresh, an opportunity to have a person come in and help work with the governance team, similar to what we had early on when the governance team members were being trained on the board protocols and how to operate as a board. We had a person from FSBA come in, Andrea Messina, the executive director there, and she came and trained the board directly, and it went very well. The board members really enjoyed it. So the format of these may take a number of different things. It may end up being a board retreat. It may end up being, that's often how strategic plan concepts are looked at, but that's something that we are currently looking at. And the superintendent has just begun that engagement with the board members, ascertaining their willingness to go down that path. So that's something that is in the works. And so I felt that it was important to mention that because as members of the CSI committee, it's not often that you have the opportunity to also participate when you're doing a more meaty activity such as a strategic plan refresh. It can be all the way up to the highest level of the mission, the vision, the values, all the way into specific strategic objectives. And so I think your participation in this committee is very timely, and it can be a very powerful opportunity for this committee to really be a voice in helping our board members and our governance team as they navigate this space. Additionally to that, it would probably be likely that there will be more engagement to stakeholder groups beyond just the board level. It's very likely they would reach out to the executive team, so the cabinet member, of which I'm a member of that group, as well as other groups such as parents, students, principals, teachers. Those are things that can sometimes happen depending on the full nature of the scope of work. All the different firms that do this type of work do it slightly differently, and so that's something that we're just in the process of looking at. But at some point, I do anticipate bringing back more information as we get closer to the type of engagement that we may or may not go down on that road. So it's really a refresh. So with that said, any questions about anything that I've said so far? I know I went quickly just because I don't have a lot of substantive material to share on that yet, but it is something I wanted to bring to this committee's attention.
Yeah, let me clarify. When you said workshop, would that be for the school board members only or for the committee?
So if the board members are coming together as a group, even if it's the verbiage that's often used is something like a retreat, that still is something that's subject to sunshine law, and so it would be something where members from the community could attend. It would be publicly noticed. It may not be in the board. The only difference really is it may not be in the boardroom formally, just because there's a different vibe when people are all together in that. Oftentimes the refreshes pick unique destinations where they can all be together. It's a little bit more informal seeming, but the rules of sunshine are still observed. All the other aspects do occur. So folks would be able to attend as they would any other public meeting as they could attend this meeting as well.
Yeah, I'm just interested in the direction we're going. I was talking to Michelle when we first sat down. So we only have 3 more meetings after this meeting. So if we're going to make any kind of impact, we really have to take a look at our focus.
Absolutely.
And my question is along those lines, does he have any target deadlines as to when he wants some updates, when he wants some substantive changes?
That he hasn't shared. Whatever he will expect, he would say it to all of the committees, and so I assume that the next committee chair meeting, when they come together for all the committees, they're all just resuming now. That was the direction we received that basically the recovery work was so significant with the hurricane, it was just a total shift away from kind of where we all were trying to go to having to just deal with those issues and a lot of the economic fallout from it, and just the disruption that it caused. So he said, let's wait until January. That's what the board kind of guided, that January is really when they wanted to resume. As a result, we want to jump back in it, but we haven't discussed if they may ask for additional meetings. We haven't asked what that offline engagement could look like. We're just not really sure. So I think all those are valid questions, and I would say something to raise when the committee chairs do meet with Dr. Bernier. I think he's going to probably have some thoughts, but I think he'd also love to hear from the committees if there are recommendations to that effect. Any other questions related to what I shared before I get into the next piece? Anything else about the strategic plan refresh or just any other issues related to that?
Nope, I think we'll look forward to hearing the update when you have it, Dr. Savage. So the next item on the agenda is the review of the committee response data. Those are the consideration of future topics that hopefully all of us contributed our voice to. And Dr. Savage is going to share that with us.
It's my pleasure, Dr. Stork. So these, we did have 10 responses to the piece, so that's a pretty good sample from the committee to get that. So the questions, as you'll kind of see as we go through them, the format, the Google form that they're collected through, it automatically has a data visualization that helps us see it. So the first one is essentially, I'm familiar with the district strategic plan. And to remind you, the rating scale went from a 1 to 5, with 5 being strongly agree, 1 being strongly disagree. So the higher the numbers, the more we have agreement. And so in this particular case, the familiarity with the district strategic plan showed that the vast majority of membership that responded to the survey were. So you had 8 of the 10 that were either a 4 or 5. So that shows there is some familiarity, which is probably a strength as we move forward on the committee. The second is, I would like to learn more about how the school district of Lee County attempts to meet the academic and social emotional needs of each student. And you saw in this particular case, there were 3 neutral. No one disagreed with that statement, but there were 5 that rated it at the strongly agree level. So an attempt to kind of learn more about this particular area. Half of the respondents gave it the highest score that was available. The next piece was, I would like to learn more about how the school district engages families and community business members in the success of the district. And again, these are taken verbatim from the strategic plan relative to the strategic objectives. So in this particular case, again, half of the respondents gave it a level, the 5 of strongly agree, and the other 3 neutral and 2 at the agree level. This one, though, however, was our highest vote getter in terms of a strategic objective, and that is, I would like to learn more about how the school district attempts to create a culture of support and high performance for all employees. And this ties back to our workforce success. So this was particularly interesting because this was the one where of the 10, 8 of them gave it the highest possible score. So I wanted to make sure I reflected that by putting the green check mark, but this clearly was the top rated among the strategic objectives, although all of them showed some interest. And it goes back to Mr. Ribble's point earlier of trying to pick some focal areas. You're really looking for the overall committee voice on these pieces as well. The next strategic objective is around continuous improvement. I would like to learn more about how the school district attempts to improve and align processes and utilize technology to maximize efficiency and effectiveness to achieve its strategic objectives. And this particular one had, again, 6 in the strongly agree category. However, it's the first time we saw any in the disagree factor, where some felt that was not as significant to learn more about this particular area. So you can see that with the 1 and the 2, have one each and then 2 neutral. So of those strategic objectives, you can see these are the strategic objectives of the district, but the next kind of guiding method in the plan focuses on our long-term objectives. And a lot of these have very specific initiatives and things that help to try to drive and improve these efforts. So this was a little different. The data visualization that is created through the form is not very easy to interpret. So in this one, I put it in a table form instead. And based on the 10 rankings of those scores, a lower score indicates a higher priority. So for example, in this one, when you're asked to rank them, a ranking of 1 signifies my top ranked issue. So you'll notice that when you average all those rankings together of a 1, that would then yield a lower number. The top vote getter was increasing academic achievement, which I have to echo, I have to say, just as I get a chance to work with Dr. Bernier pretty frequently, his number one focus is academic achievement, which is a challenge, especially after a hurricane and after a pandemic and learning loss. But he's very much focused on academic achievement. Every time we talk about measurables and metrics, he's always focused on reading, writing, mathematics, science, social studies, graduation rate, student attendance, all the things that really lead to increased outcomes for our students. So I felt that it was important to echo that while the committee spoke with a voice, that this is a top area of focus for them. I would also say it's one of the superintendent's top areas of focus as well. It certainly is his number 1. And so I just wanted to make sure I talked about that alignment. The second highest ranking, interestingly, was the increasing operational efficiency and effectiveness, which, as a contrast, dovetails with this particular area of the strategic objective, continuous improvement. Those two kind of go hand in hand, but while it's interesting that this actually yielded some lower ratings, on this particular area where I talked about specific long-term objectives, this came out as the number 2 highest rated priority. The importance I want to shed a light on this particular area as a person who's working in the organization is when you're speaking of the operational efficiency and effectiveness, it really is an organization-wide focus. So if you were to want to dig in deeper for this particular area, it'd be very important to also select particular areas in the organization that you would want to delve into, such as our business services, which would get into how we finance, all the aspects of how we run the budget and every aspect of how money moves through the organization. On the other hand, in human resources, you have a totally different set of objectives that are related to operational efficiency and effectiveness that they're looking at to increase their hiring speed, time to fill, things that are very important to that particular division. So while this looks like just one long-term objective, it has the potential to have a vast scope if we aren't more specific of which areas in particular we'd want to look at our efficiency. You could even look at schools and some of their processes if that was something you wanted to do. The third highest ranking was in the area of increased workforce success, which when I get to it later, there were a few qualitative aspects that went to it, but this dovetails, I think, very cleanly to the highest rated one, which talked about our culture of support and high performance for all employees. While this was clearly the top ranked item for this committee in terms of the feedback so far, as far as our strategic objectives, it does line up to that third ranking of the workforce success. And that really does speak to the quality of the people in the organization that have to carry out the work every day, not just teachers, paraprofessionals, bus drivers, leadership, all the different roles that contribute. So this is definitely a worthy area as well. The 2 lowest ranking areas actually came back to college and career readiness and kindergarten readiness. Kindergarten readiness, which with our prior superintendent, Dr. Atkins, one of the things that he was able to find when we looked at our data was that a lot of the students coming into our system are bringing a lot of new challenges. We have now become a majority Hispanic, students identifying with the Hispanic subgroup, which again, there are many, many Hispanic cultures. That's not a ubiquitous term for all folks. It's just the way that the state and the federal government tracks some of our reporting categories. It's important to note that we have a lot of the highest level of English language learners we've ever had. And so I think what Dr. Atkins was trying to be responsive to when he helped push that kindergarten readiness piece in was just an acknowledgement that we look at achievement as an overall district, but yet we start very far behind when compared to other large districts. And so when we look at our kindergarten readiness rate relative to all the districts in Florida, we have one of the lowest kindergarten readiness rates in the entire state. And that's important because it's like the pretest. When you're coming into a system, this is what's happening at the outset. Yes, sir.
So if we're one of the worst in Florida, where's Florida nationally?
This unfortunately is.
I would guess Florida
Mhm.
is below average in general. So if we're bad within Florida, that's concerning.
It's a great question. I would say each state, because of the way that the education systems are set up state by state, each state is responsible for its own educational system. So sometimes it isn't easy to compare something like that kindergarten because not everyone's taking the same assessments. However, there are some of the assessments that we do take, like STAR, for example. That is a assessment platform that is used in other states. But that isn't something that, from a state reporting standpoint, you can always compare apples to apples, because there's different assessments that are capturing that data. It's important to note that often this aligns very much with poverty as well. So that when we're talking about a lower level, it's important to note that of all the big 20 districts, we were the second lowest in terms of our direct service rate, our free and reduced lunch, essentially. So that's important, because what that means is that even though our community is blessed with many folks who come, who are retired here and bring a wealth of not just, contributing to our tax base and buying property, but a lot of great experiences professionally that add a lot of value to our community. Among our student age population, we are a very diverse district, and we have many families that are working class, working poor, and so that often the kindergarten readiness goes typically hand in hand with that. However, there are some districts, such as Pinellas, that made a real investment in the early learning. They decided that they thought that one of the best levers for change was to increase their kindergarten readiness. They invested in a lot of early learning initiatives with their Title I dollars and others to try to bring up their entry-level achievement. The theory of action behind that is to say, the more we do earlier in the system, the less intensive reading classes we have later on in the system. And that's really the thought process behind that type of initiative. I felt it was important to bring it, though, because to give a little bit more voice to this, because it showed up as such a low priority, that incidentally, Dr. Bernier also views this as a low priority. Not that he doesn't believe in early learning, I think he certainly does, but when he's much more focused on what occurs between K and 12. For him, it's very important that we optimize what we do within the system and then look at strategic partnerships to enhance what we're doing prior to them getting in our system, even though we have some early learning. So I wanted to echo that while the committee chose this as a lower priority item, not to say that any of these are unimportant. They're all very significant, but we can't tackle all of them, obviously. I wanted to make sure I echoed your alignment as a committee with Dr. Bernier's vision as well, that number one, increasing achievement goes first. I think I saw Bill.
Yeah, I want to make a comment on this kindergarten readiness. About 2 years ago, we spent a lot of time on this. And we did some focus group meetings individually out in the community. And I attended one of the Hispanic group's sessions, and a lot of the mothers were there. And I brought up this thing, I wanted to get their opinion on the assessment. And at the time, we found out as a committee, the assessment was flawed. It wasn't bilingual, and it wasn't user-friendly to use with a computer. And I'm just hoping, I assumed all this was fixed. That's why I chose, I didn't emphasize that as I did in the past, because I was under the umbrella that this thing was pretty well fixed. Do you agree with that or not?
I would say there's still lots of work to go.
Okay.
Not just here locally, though. I would say it's a statewide issue. Florida is a very, anytime you're increasing folks who are speaking English as a second language, that enhances some of the issues that they have to deal with. They're not only acquiring proficiency in their native language, but also in a new, and where we really find the biggest problem is actually not at the entry level. We actually done a pretty fair job of helping students. Children are natural learners, especially young children. They absorb quite a bit. And just being immersed in an environment that's rich in spoken English language, many students are able to be far more fluent than most members of their family. Where we find a lot of struggle is actually in the upper levels. When we have students who come into the high school level, for example, who have very little formal schooling, have language barriers and challenges that now they have to sit for English exams that are only given in English, not given in any other language, and they may not be fully literate in their native language. And so now those are folks who count the graduation rate. They're students who are given a very limited amount of time to acquire the language, and it's much more challenging at that point. So I would say if I were to look at, there's so many challenges in the system. I could go on and on about every single area and give you lots of different rabbit holes to go down, but I would just say all of these are very worthy challenges. I would say the committee's reaction, what you collectively feel strongly about, that's why I'm purposefully bringing up areas where the superintendent has given a clear direction to me, that these are areas we have to focus on with the strategic plan, because you can't do all the things. You have to be willing to say these are important things, but we're going to focus on some of these very specific things. And I wanted to make sure I share that with you as well.
I think the other thing for this committee to be aware of, if you haven't been on the committee before, is that we've also gone through college and career readiness presentations as well, and that may be another reason why that scored a little bit lower than some of the others, because that's work that this committee has done recently in the past couple of years as well.
That's a very good point. Moving on to the qualitative themes, and then we can go back to any area in this. I wanted to make sure I gave voice to some of the comments that weren't quantitatively ranked, but were qualitatively evident. So one particular one that came up with the highest frequency was a concern over mental and emotional health for students, parents, and staff. It's not terribly surprising considering some of the challenges we've been through, whether it's the physical loss of our structure and folks losing their homes, and workers, many of our staff. I know many stories off the top of my head of folks who've lost everything. And here they are showing up to work every day. The students have been through the same. So there's no doubt these are significant things. But I understand the committee's done a lot of work on this in the past. So whether or not you choose to go down that path, I wanted to give voice that it was the most frequent of the qualitative comments. Second to that actually came career readiness. So while we didn't see the career readiness pop in the quantitative section, there were 2 comments that did speak to that. Again, it could have been 2 people who could strongly agree on that, but I wanted to give voice to that qualitative theme as well, student connection to career readiness. And then the comments that only had maybe a single person, but I didn't want to lose that theme, were these 3. Oh, yes.
Sorry, just
No,
a
please.
question. On the previous one, when it was quantitative, it was college and career. But on this qualitative, it's specifically, so was that more targeted on career versus the college readiness?
Yes, this specific one for the thematic statements, I can read you the actual statements that were made, because we're not talking high frequency, it's just 2 statements. But it just felt that it was very important. And I want to make sure that as a committee, you have the chance to hear your colleagues and what they thought were really passionate items for the folks who took the time to write that additional piece. The last 3 that we had were students with disabilities, had a singular comment that thematically aligned to that, as well as one focused on sustainability. It didn't go into particular detail about that piece, but did talk about sustainability. And then the last was just an integration of limited English proficient students and families, which incidentally we talked about a little bit already, and some of the challenges we have related to that. So that said, that was all the information that we were able to gain from that survey. And certainly the hope was to try to focus, knowing that we didn't have a significant amount of time with the committee to do too much, but we want to really go in depth on whichever areas you'd like. That is the information for you to react to. So I'm happy to go to any part of the slide or entertain at this time any comments and conversation related to this.
So in the spirit of what we were told in our very first meeting about how we can stay focused on some of the ideas that we talk about in our meetings, and since we only have 3 after this one for the rest of the year, I just want to point out that probably we shouldn't have a whole ton of discussion unless there's a motion, just so we can stick with Robert's Rules of Order and keep everybody happy in that way. But I also want to just remind the committee that we appreciate, Dr. Savage, the way that you aligned these with the strategic plan, because that's the charge of this committee, is to stay focused on the strategic plan. So if, as a committee, we choose any one of these topics to focus on, I really encourage all of us to then go back into the strategic plan and take a look at some of those indicators and talk about maybe recommendations we have about using different indicators or changing the way we evaluate the current ones as our discussion. And I will be happy to put a motion on the floor, so if there is a second, we can have an initial discussion. Understanding that there are other committees in the district, school board advisory committees. We have a finance school board advisory committee, we have a DAC school board advisory committee, we have a construction school board advisory committee. So some of those areas within some of these categories might be covered by those other committees. So understanding that, I would like to make a motion that based on the 80% of us who thought that workforce success was probably at the top of the list, that we look at that as our first topic that we are going to get more in depth with related to the strategic plan. Is there a second for that motion?
Megan Clark, I will second that.
Okay, so now I'll open it up for discussion.
One thing I think is really important here, I'm a healthcare background, but there's this book that has a pretty reactive title called Patients Come Second. And I feel the same way about this. So ultimately it's saying take care of your workforce and then your workforce will take care of your patients. So I feel the same about this way. If we can take care of our workforce, there's so many issues right now going on of how we can take care, just taking care of ourselves and that impact the work that we do every day. So if we can set up the teachers, the staff, everyone for a better, we can have a further discussion about what tactics that looks like, but I think this is really important work to dive into for these times.
That's a great comment.
Anybody else have anything else they'd like to share?
Are we confident that that correlation is there? Because I apologize, I wasn't one of the 10, because I think the deadline was October 4th. And being a master procrastinator, I was gonna wait till the end, and then September 28th hit, and lo and behold, I didn't get around to it. But I would have thought the top focus would be academic achievement. But you made a perfect comment, so is that the ends to, is that the means to the ends? I mean, if we're acknowledging the ends is academic achievement, but the means on the best way for us to try to help provide some guidance on how to achieve that end is on workforce improvement, then I'm fine with that as long as we don't lose sight of the brass ring being the academic achievement. So we want the employees to be supported, to be successful, to achieve the academic achievement for the students or to help the students.
Absolutely. I think one of the most beneficial ways we could probably address your question, Mike, is to talk about the data. So Dr. Savage, you might have the numbers, but if we look at even just teacher shortage in this district, right? So that obviously has a direct impact on academic achievement. If you don't have teachers for the classroom, if you have more kids in the classroom than you should because you don't have enough teachers, those sorts of things, that's obviously impacting academic achievement. Do you have, I'm putting you on the spot, Dr. Do you happen to have the numbers?
Well, I always have data.
Of the amount of teachers that the district is currently down, and that's just focusing on teachers, never mind staff or.
And Dr. Ted, so correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe in a spirit of honesty, in the previous committee, in one of the SAC meetings I attended, it was clearly stated that one of the reasons we did go to the full 7-period schedule was to mitigate teacher shortage. That it was admitted that that was one of the reasons we were going away from the block calendar to help reduce that problem. But I don't know if it has been reduced or the problem's still as bad as it was before.
Yeah. So I don't want to give away, draft presentations, but this just speaks to your conversation, right? It's a great conversation, a very important one. There's so many efforts, based on the schedule design you pick, based on what your staffing level is in terms of your student-teacher ratio. All those things impact your bottom line, but this at a high level, it gives you kind of a sense of the overall trend relative to hiring and our overall instructional hires contrasted against our retirements and our terminations. Now, when we say terminations, that doesn't mean we terminated them. That means they terminated their relationship with the district, which usually means they left the district. They moved, they chose another career, something along those lines. So at a 10,000 level foot view, you can see that 678, that was for fiscal year 22. That was the amount of instructional hires. So we hired a record number of teachers, the most we've ever hired in a single year, almost 700. However, we had over 800 leave, which was also a record for us. So the overall lion's share of this is, and the retirements are relatively stable. I mean, that's something you heard was our people returning. I'm very much into the data always, and I think that's why I love the strategic plan side of it, is it's just objective storytelling. And this is, and you can see it longitudinally. So like, for example, the beginning of the pandemic in fiscal year 20, we didn't lose as many people and we didn't hire as many people because I think that was kind of a retraction of everything. There was, people weren't afraid what kind of job it may have, but you can see that aside from that 1 year where it took a big drop, the rest of the years, the level of terminations is pretty significant. And what you can also see is it's not pacing correctly. So that blue line would have to be higher than that number in order for us to have a surplus. So what that means is that we always have vacancies. teaching vacancies. And this is just teaching units. It doesn't speak to any other personnel groups, it's instructional positions only. So at a high level, this is just an example of this conversation in a form of data.
So I'm sorry, it's hard to read.
Yes.
So is the staffing gap, the orange bar from between where the blue line is and the top of the orange bar?
That's correct.
Staffing gap?
And the larger the gap, the more pronounced, the more the negative impact. So like, for example, even though we hired in that particular year, like this was the year was most favorable.
Yeah.
490, we hired 490 staff, which was actually fewer than the year before. But we had less of a negative impact on the organization because the overall delta between the amount that we lost was significantly lower. So this particular year, we lost 536 plus 88. So I don't have the total number of that, but essentially just over 600. We only lost 600 folks. And so it was a smaller delta than the present one, which you can see is pretty significant shortfall. Does that help interpret that piece?
So we've been talking about this turnover thing for 5 years now. So in your experience, in the perfect world of a perfect school district, what's a good turnover number for a school?
Well,
School district, you know?
so unfortunately, that's way, in my mind, I'm not nearly qualified expert to give you. I can say SHRM, basically the human resource organization that essentially guides all larger enterprises, that governmental entities, school districts, hospitals, to try to speak to do it. They have metrics that they develop that essentially say this is really where you should be. I'm not the HR chief, so I couldn't spout off exactly what the
Let me just speak corporately, because I did this for 35 years.
Yes, sir.
And as a senior VP at UPS, we pride ourselves, now I don't know what it is today because I've been there for 10 years, but we pride ourselves that we had a 4% turnover and we worked our tails off. We did people workshops, we did all kinds of things to make sure our people were treated fairly, all the things we're talking about here, to get the bottom line, to your question, fixed, because that's a core process. If you can fix the work environment and everybody comes to work happy and knowledgeable and they're gonna be successful, they're gonna stick around. And I know there's other issues here, people come up with this. The famous one I really think is a joke is everybody still uses the crybaby thing, well, they can't afford to live here. Are you kidding me? Take a look, live in Philadelphia. You got a 6% state tax, which we don't have here. You got a 10% city tax. Try those taxes on for an outfit and then compare what the cost of living is down here. So we get into these excuses and we just ride them to death. And I know the hospital, they're good at that too, for the reason we don't have nurses.
So taking all subjectivity out of it, one measure would be what is our turnover rate compared to the state average? That takes out any subjectivity. So on average for the state, are we worse than average for the state? And more importantly to me would be nationally, where are we compared to the national average for turnover?
Well, without getting too deep into substantive, because again, this is a very worthy topic. Clearly, it was a high priority. What I would advise is we have a lot of these metrics that we could bring. I just gave you a appetizer of what it is. We have all of these metrics that we could bring, and we could talk about whatever context they're able to collect in, and I think it would be very meaningful. We'd have our HR personnel, probably our head of our HR system would come and present that information to you and engage with you. We actually have a strategic plan presentation coming up from our HR that will be doing that, and so they could bring a more in-depth version for you all as a committee to engage with, if this is what the committee wants as part. I think that is the point of the discussion presently, is that this would be a really salient example of something we could dig into with data and really look at the strategic plan alignment. It could really do some powerful work.
To me, it's that simple. If we're on average with retention, then I would say, well, why would we focus on that? But if we're a lot worse than the national average for retention, then yeah, that is something that's unique to our area we should be focused on.
I think it would be, well, there's a motion and a second on the floor, so eventually we're going to have to vote on that motion. But I think it would be valuable to have the data from HR before we continue to have conversations, and maybe as a committee come up with a recommendation, because some of that information will be shared with us in terms of, you know, where we are compared to other school districts of the same size in the state and nationally. And I think that's, in order to compare apples to apples, that's kind of what we have to do, right? Is look at school districts of this size with similar demographics, that sort of thing.
I like to call the question because I think we heard enough from the members. Let's move on.
I think it's a good idea. All right, so let's take a vote. The motion, Michelle Stork made the motion, that's me, and Brienne made the second, right?
Yes.
And so the motion is for this committee to, oh, I'm
Second.
sorry.
Sorry, Megan.
I agree.
Megan.
You made the second, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for the
Sorry.
correction. So the motion was to have this committee review workforce success as our first, maybe only, topic of discussion. You can leave that phrase out, Misty, as our first topic of discussion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining? We have one abstaining. Okay. So the motion passes, and so Dr. Savage, I'm assuming you'll be able to get something on the schedule for us at our upcoming meeting in terms of an
Absolutely.
HR presentation or any other information you think this committee would need to review.
Absolutely. I'm happy to do that.
Okay, great. Do we have any other topics? Does anybody else have another motion for another topic you might want to also look at this year?
I would like to look at the academic achievement.
Okay, so are you making a motion?
Please, yes.
Okay.
I'd like to make a motion to discuss academic achievement.
Is it Christy? Okay, so Christy is making that motion. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, so we have a second from Yolanda. So let's open it up for discussion.
So ideally for me, the important thing is really that integration of the non-English learners. You know, we're talking from the elementary, grade school level entry, all the way through integration in our community. It starts at this level with the education system. You know, in the classrooms, it could take away resources dedicated to all of the students because the kids that are not English are struggling to learn. So that's a definitely important topic for me.
Oh, yes, and I can tell as a teacher, being a reading teacher, I've had the reading endorsement. I finished that in 2007, which was through the school district, and we received a $500 stipend for that. And all the time I went through teaching, when I was teaching that, I was told that I wouldn't have to worry about the ESOL endorsement, and then I had the opportunity to work in adult education. They also said I didn't have to worry about going to take those last couple of classes because I think they weren't available at the time. So to make a long story short, I ended up having to take the ESOL out of pocket and pay out of pocket for the 2 classes that I needed for the ESOL endorsement. And what I'm seeing here, and I can just, they're very hard workers, even the adults that are in the ESOL program, and they're very hard workers, but it's very hard. Like right now where I am, I'm getting several students that speak no English. No English.
Is it all age levels?
I have 7th grade mostly this year. Most of my teaching experience is middle school, 6th, 7th, and 8th, but right now I have mostly 7th grade. And then, you know, I have the ones that have some English, they're not proficient, you know, most of them are bilingual. And then I have to figure out how to pair them with students that they can work with and keep them from. But it's really hard now with those students that are coming in that don't speak any English.
So one of the things, once we take a vote, once I call for the vote, one of the things that I think is important if we do a presentation on this topic as well is to have the ESOL department maybe share with this committee what funding sources are available specifically for ESOL students, because there are things that I think this committee needs to be aware of with that regard. Okay, so does anybody else have any other comments related to this
yeah.
topic?
I guess it's kind of a question, but it seems like, and this is a really valid concern, and I wonder if there's a way we can integrate that into workforce success, because you made the point of, hey, I had to pay for these certifications on my own. You made a point of, hey, these teachers are having to expend resources on these other students. Is there a way we can kind of fold this concern into workforce success? Because I do feel like providing our teachers, our staff with the resources they need to be successful, part of that would be these certifications, these additional instructors, things like that. How do we go about doing that? I think that might be, you know, as we look, maybe we can't tackle, you mentioned earlier, we can't tackle the whole workforce. So maybe this is an aspect of that we make an integral part of the project.
Yeah, I think it would be maybe a great idea if we let HR know ahead of time if they could address what's available in terms of training for ESOL resources, that would be great as well. Part of the
It's
presentation.
definitely necessary, because we're really short right now with our ESOL pairs. We only have like 1 or 2 ESOL pairs, paraprofessionals. And they're the only ones that can work with these students that need the the accommodations that they need.
So,
So test scores dropping after COVID and not recovering, especially now after Ian. So overall academic achievement issues in Lee County, is the ESOL the biggest problem? I don't know if it is. I'm sure it's a problem. I don't know if it's the biggest problem. Is
A
it?
problem, but there is also record high incoming immigration. It continues. So, you could put a stop to it. You could look at prior test scores, but there are still hundreds and thousands of families that are coming in fresh, new every month. So even at 2021 test scores are only going to give you a snapshot in time from that period. It's not going to look at the 7th graders that are new here that she's looking at, or any of the 12th graders that are getting ready to look at, college and career.
So ESOL programs have been in place for many years. Dr. Savage, do we have that data that validates that statement,
Well,
that the percentage of, because the number of students, period, has been skyrocketing. So do we have the data that the percentage of students requiring ESOL support, has that been steadily increasing year?
I know that we've had a significant increase in the amount of students who enrolled in the district. I know we've had the highest, at least it's probably a year or two old in terms of this data set, but I do recall that we had the largest increase in second language learners in the entire state. So certainly there is some data to support that. I would say if we find that these are worthy topics that we want to dig into deeper, I would rather give that opportunity to have the people who own this particular, have real expertise deeper than what I can give you. I can give you a pretty good breadth of something, but I would say to have the folks who, this is their area and they're responsible for it, to give them that opportunity to come, share with you the data. And there's various questions. I didn't just hear one question. We heard, there are a number of things in this. What percentage of the low achievement? So if we're looking at, academic achievement as a top priority here, of that share of non-proficient learners, what percentage of that are students who speak English as a second language or, don't have them? Those are things we could bring. That's data we could look and react to, so that I wouldn't want to speculate, and I wouldn't want to say something that is, my opinion. I'd rather share with you the organizational-wide data and let the group respond to that and look at it and make for yourselves.
Because to me, it should be a percentage of the student body. If it's been going up, then we know it's an increasing concern. If it's not going up, well, then it's the same level of concern it was 5 years ago. It's just, there's more of them because there's more students, period, so.
There's definitely increased growth. I mean, I can say that without citing the specific numbers, because I prepared some of the data slides on some of these things. So I recall it was the highest growth rate that we had, but that was, I believe, pre-pandemic. So I don't know. What I can say that even through the pandemic, we still had a lot of people moving here. Demographically, I wouldn't want to speculate on what percentage of the folks moving here were second language learners. I would want that hard data in front of me.
That's the critical data point as far as I'm concerned, because the county's been booming with English speakers too. So it's like, is that percentage, so from an overall teacher perspective, is the number of second language speakers, is that number on average been going up over the last 10 years, or is it?
do you feel like you need that to know that information in order to vote on whether this committee will review that as a topic, or just?
I feel I wouldn't be positioned to say I want to focus on English as a second language if I don't know if it's not been increasing.
Well, the motion is actually to focus on academic achievement, correct? Yeah.
So that I'll vote on.
And as a teacher, my concern would be academic progress for all students involved, because I have a mixture. I have a diverse group that I'm working with, and I don't want to see, the students not make progress. That's the goal here, especially in the curriculum that I teach in our department. We have different curriculums, different levels based on the students' reading levels. So that's my biggest concern right now, especially with my students, the progress that they're making.
Okay. I'm going to call for the vote. So the motion is on the floor that this committee also focuses on a second topic, which would be increasing academic achievement. And that motion was made by Christie and seconded by Yolanda. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstain. Okay, so that motion passes as well. So Dr. Savage, you have 2 topics that you have to organize for us.
And I really appreciate it. It's very helpful to us because one person may be available. I want to get the best information for you that so you can really dig into it. That really helps me to have 2 topics like that. So whichever one I can get first on the first one, we'll get that going for you. And I'll make sure that for the academic piece, they will have specific data related to one of the populations of interest that clearly was reflected in this committee discussion.
Okay, great. Anybody else have anything else that they would like to recommend in terms of what this committee reviews for the rest of the year? Okay, so Mr. Fisher is not available. Dr. Savage, do you have anything you'd like to share about the board member report with the?
Yes, just that Mr. Fisher right now, he certainly would be here. Yeah, he's very, in fact, we spoke before the break, and I think he was horrified that he could not be here, but because he takes his obligations very seriously and he wants to be here. However, he's wearing a very important hat today. He's been up in Tallahassee advocating. This is a great opportunity for he and the board members, the superintendent, to go up and advocate in Tallahassee, meeting with legislators. So his advocacy role is a significant aspect of what he is here to do as well. And so certainly he sends his regards to everyone here, and he will certainly be at future meetings. But he just could not be here tonight. That said, we have 3 new board members, and they've really had a seamless integration into our district. And so just to be very thankful that with transitions you never know exactly how those things are going to go when you have new board members. And it's been a phenomenal process to see these new board members come in, fully try to arm themselves with understanding, and really as a collective governance team, we've had very efficient board meetings. It's really been it's been very impressive to see the group working together with the superintendent. As a governance team, they're all working together. It doesn't mean they agree on all issues, but everything's happening very respectfully. And so just from Mr. Fisher, who really models tremendous respect for the staff, for the work of the district, just want to extend his good wishes to this committee. He's very excited to learn more about all of you and this committee and the work of this committee, and I know that he's looking forward to the next meeting when he can attend.
Great, thank you, Dr. Savage. So, Misty, do we have any public comment? I don't physically see anybody here, but, okay.
Not that I don't think.
Okay, so now I will open it up for good of the order. I do have one thing, so I'll get us started. I encourage all of us, since we voted now on the 2 topics that we are going to investigate further, I encourage all of us to go back and just review those sections of the existing strategic plan before the next meeting, so we know what those indicators are. As we're getting the information, we can kind of align those with what the indicators are in the strategic plan, so we're staying focused on that in terms of those 2 topics. And our next meeting, this is another thing for the good of the order, so I lied, I had more than one thing. Our next meeting is February 16th, not the 14th, because of the Valentine's Day holiday, and that one is scheduled to be a Zoom meeting. So just a reminder for everybody. And that's all I have for the good of the order. Does anybody else have anything for the good of the order?
So everyone wants to stay with the one on, one off, because of.
Mike, you're welcome to make a motion to change it if you'd like.
Well, I'll be honest, I don't see a reason why we wouldn't meet in person. It seemed to be a lot better for easier, at least for me to engage than over Zoom in your house. So I would make a motion to have the February 16th meeting be in person.
I'll second that motion.
Is there any discussion? Okay, so there's a motion on the floor made by Mike, seconded by Bill, to change the February 16th meeting from Zoom to in-person. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed? Well, that's going to be me. Anybody abstaining? Okay, so we have one abstention. Okay, so the motion's carried, so our February 16th meeting will be changed to an in-person meeting. And that will need to be changed as an advertisement online as well.
We'll take care of that.
Yeah, okay,
We'll go to the problem as well.
okay.
We need to make sure that Christie was abstaining and Michelle was a nay. The rest stays.
Okay, does anybody else have anything for the good of the order? Wow, this was a fast one. Okay, so do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting? Mike?
Make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Okay, is there a second?
Megan Clark, I second.
Thank you, Megan. All in favor of adjourning tonight's meeting, say aye. I'm not gonna ask if anybody's opposed. We're good.
Oh, we all want to stay.
Excuse me, would everyone just make sure that you are signed in on that log over there before you leave?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you, Dr. Savage.
Oh, my pleasure.
Is it a paper law or?
Over there on that.
Oh,
Make sure you're here.
That's why I do. One spot to another. Keep my